tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lyon's gone. New South Wales are 9 down onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners, and we're recording this on the eve of the second test between the West Indies and Australia in Grenada. And also, as we record this, the second test between England and India has just started. England have sent India in. So lots to talk about, rule changes, domestic news. Joining me, as always, is Damien Watson. Damien, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Meadows. How are you? I like the fact that you came down to my hometown, Melbourne, during the week. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I had a great time in Melbourne, and I got to walk past the sporting precinct and, saw Rod Laver Arena, the MCG, all the great Amy Park, all the great grounds down there in Melbourne. But great to be back in Sydney. As I was flying in across the Sydney Harbour, it felt great to be returned. Like, I could see why this is the most beautiful city in Australia, just looking over Sydney, flying back. Always a beautiful feeling. Anyway, let's get into it because lots to talk about. So the second test, as I said, starts sort of tomorrow, if you're listening to this, and Steve Smith is set to return. Now, Barrett Sundaresan, speaking to Gerard Whateley on SEN, said he saw him do some fielding exercises and he was mucking around with the strapping. So it seems to be fielding might be a bit more of a concern than batting for Smith. I think batting he's okay, but fielding, they're going to have to hide him. Maybe he's going to be down at fine leg. Maybe he's going to be mid on at mid off. But Damien, the only reason I can see him not playing is actually more the fielding than the batting.
Yeah, which is interesting, isn't it? But I think ultimately you take caution in this situation. When the Aussies are 1-0 up, I think you'd obviously want to get out there, but you want to take caution in this situation when you've got a player of his importance, particularly with Australia's batting woes at the moment, coming into an Ashes series. You wouldn't want to expose him to the elements too much, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's see how they go. But at this stage, he's tracking to play, and Josh Inglis would miss out, and that will be the only change for Australia in the second test. There hasn't been any discussion yet around playing two spinners, so I doubt that's going to happen. Alex Carey also spoke in a press conference overnight, and he was asked a question that I thought gave an interesting answer about that catch in the first test where he's diving away to his left, and there was some controversy about it being given out. Carey said that when he was watching the replay, he thought it was going to be overturned. So he thought it might have been not out. And then he went on and to square up with the umpires, did express that it was a very difficult match for umpires, and there was a lot of 50-50 calls, and he thinks they did a good job. Obviously Darren Sammy was fine for criticising the umpires, but Carey, we know he's a great statesman, and he was a lot nicer.
Yeah, playing the diplomatic role, Manners. Look, at the end of the day, no use crying over spilt milk when you win by however many runs we won by. So, I don't think it's going to worry them too much to a degree. But, yeah, Alex Carey, when you say thought his catch might get overturned, it reminded me of, was it Greg Dyer back in the day, Manners, in the 80s, who dropped a catch and claimed it and felt really bad about it in the match against New Zealand. And I think he had some issue with cricket authorities off the back of that and never really got back into the Australian side after that. So it's interesting how things have changed, times have changed.
Oh, absolutely. And technology certainly added a new little wrinkle in there, because you can see every frame, and that can sometimes add more doubt to a situation. Alex Carey said that, and Alex Carey said something else. It was quite a technical question, but one of the journalist asked him if he'd changed his backlift at all this year. And Carey said that earlier on in the year, he changed his backlift slightly. And well, all I can say is the results have been pretty dramatic because Alex Carey has been on quite a run of form this year. He's played so well. So whatever he did with his backlift, I've never seen him play better. And, he is the perfect example of why you should never write a cricketer off, because people are allowed to get better, Damien. And that's why I think when a player's, we're going to talk about top order players later, but just generally, don't count out someone being better in their 30s than their 20s.
And that's a point a lot of the coaches have made as well. And we'll speak about Matt Redshaw very shortly, but he was interviewed recently, a very good article from Adam Burnett at cricket.com.au, where that was laboured to him. That point was laboured to him as well. He's approaching his 30s now. And sometimes, as we saw with Usman Khawaja, you can have a bit of a renaissance. We've seen it over the years with Mike Hussey, etc. So, yeah, I think you're a bit older and wiser. Do you think we're ageist as a cricket community or not? I don't think we are compared to other sports personally. And that goes with coaches too.
No, and in some ways, cricketers have never played on for longer. Faf du Plessis, he's 40 now, and he's playing in T20 leagues all around the world. And so I think we're actually seeing now that because cricketers are looking after their bodies more and fast bowlers are putting more effort into sports science and conditioning, that players can actually play for longer. But yeah, whatever Carey did with his backlift, kudos to him, because he's never batted better. And also, and speaking of Alex Carey, a big change in the Australian team. Nathan Lyon has handed over the reins of the victory song Under the Southern Cross. And after 12 years, Alex Carey will now sing the song if there's a victory. So in Barbados with Nathan Lyon's last go as leading the song, that was his 67th time in 12 years. Interestingly, I think there was a little breadcrumb trail here. In 2023, when Lyon left Lords to come home, he handed the honour over to Carey, but unfortunately they didn't win a test match in the rest of that series. So Carey didn't get to sing the song, but I think that's kind of fitting. So, and Lyon has stressed that he's not retiring. He's absolutely not retiring, but he just feels this is the right time to pass the honour on, and he's done it longer than anybody else. So probably a good thing. And when you think about options, Damien, there actually wasn't many options apart from Carey. The top six is so shaky. Maybe Travis Head would have been someone he could have given it to.
I reckon Head would have been the other player, given his characteristics. He's a blokey type of bloke. I reckon he would have been the other contender. I reckon the two South
exactly. Yeah. So the fast bowlers, you never know. They're probably a bit too old for that honour and probably near the end of their career. But anyway, quite a big thing to pass that baton on. Interestingly, the names that have done it before, Rod Marsh started the tradition, Alan Border's done it, Boone's done it, Healy's done it, Ponting's done it, Langer's done it, Hussey's done it, and then Hussey gave it to Lyon 12 years ago. So you think about that beautiful link with history there, the way the generations link, and now it's linked with Alex Carey. And I couldn't think of a better person to do it. He's the consummate professional. He represents Australia so well. He famously was canny enough to run out Johnny Bairstow at Lords. An absolutely heroic act. That's up there with anything an Australian's ever done. So I think just on that alone, he deserves the team song.
How does it end? Australia, you fucking beauty? Is that how it
That's
ends?
it. Absolutely.
We're allowed to swear on this podcast, aren't we? Yeah, we are.
We are, but I was listening to Craig Hutchison, your boss at SEN, on his podcast today, The Sounding Board, and he was asked a question, and they cited Adam Collins on his cricket podcast. They said, do you like people swearing on podcasts? And Hutchie and Damien Barrett said they're old school broadcasters. They don't really like it. But they have to be wrong because everybody's doing it and seems to be liking it. So there you go.
I think as long as you don't swear for the sake of swearing, like some people do, that's just my opinion. It's funny, isn't it, though? Sometimes swearing, and I know we're probably going a bit off topic, but sometimes swearing makes something funnier when you say you had a swear word or something.
I've got a few ways with this, and you know this, I mean, you're on the radio all the time where you can't swear. That's one thing. But podcasts are free and easy. I try
Yeah.
not to swear too much, but the most popular episode of the podcast, there was 116 swear words in about 20 minutes. So, that's a pretty high ratio.
Fucking
Anyway,
brilliant.
anyway, that's the Australian team song. Under the Southern Cross I stand, a sprig of wattle in my hand. Australia, you effing beauty.
You can say it, man.
What was that?
You can say it.
I can say it. All right, now let's get into the second test predictions. I've got a couple of concerns. My fear is the West Indies completely fall away here. The fact that they stayed with Australia for the first couple of days, but then were completely outmatched on that last day. That is the fear, that they fall away. And then I guess from an Australian point of view, it's a huge test for Sam Constas and Cameron Green. Probably a bigger test for Constas because he hasn't really done much at test level yet, whereas Green has a bit more behind him. But these two need to show more at the top of the order than they did in that first test.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if they do fall away, the West Indies, well, there's no real excuse, is there? I suppose a lot depends on the conditions as well. I'm not massive in regards to, because we've seen certainly some interesting variations over the years of the Caribbean Menas, but I'm not a massive expert when it comes to conditions in the Caribbean. Where this second test is going to be played, do you know? And I know we probably can't really decipher it until we really get underway, but is there a lot of history at this particular venue in regards to whether it favours batting or bowling? Because that has to be taken into consideration as well, I think, when you judge performance.
Look, I think there's only been 4 test matches played at Grenada before, so there's not a lot of track record. And they asked Darren Sammy in the press conference about conditions, and he was very cagey, not wanting to give too much away. So I think we'll probably see similar conditions to what we saw in the first test. A bit in it for the quicks. It'll turn late in the game if they get there. It's pretty dry over there at the moment. So, yeah, but it's an unknown. They don't play a lot of test cricket there, so there's not a lot of history. And I guess we haven't had the big press conference before the game with Cummins where he indicates if they're going to do anything radical, bring Kuhneman in and drop us quick. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah. Look, I think Australia should, having been held pretty close to the West Indies for the first 2 days, I can see sort of streaking away and being too strong for them.
Yeah, you would think so. But having said that, I think we underestimated the Windies coming into the first test. I think they showed that they're capable of at least being competitive. I know they fell away dramatically, but I think it'd be dangerous to underestimate them. So I don't think it'll be as convincing as... I still think Australia will win, but I don't think it'll be as convincing as what people think. Could be wrong.
Interesting, though, they did come back in that second test when they were here 2 summers ago, and
Correct.
They won and squared the series. So they were convincingly beaten in the first test there. But yeah, I'm expecting Australia to do well, and I'd love to see Constas make a bit of a fist of this and look like the batter we all know he can be.
Just on Constas before we move on, do you think he will play his natural game? Because a lot of people are making the argument that he was playing too conservatively. And you can make the argument also that that's what he was pushed to do, to become more of a test player in that format, to not be too over-exuberant at the crease like he was at the Shield at various stages. So I'm just wondering where he will teeter at this time round.
McDonald flagged in a press conference that Constas needs to find the middle ground. So it's got to be somewhere between, ramping Bumrah for 6 and defending everything. He's got to learn to rotate the strike and work the ball around, and he's a work in progress. So I think he's got to find the middle ground. He's got to find that, second or third gear. You can't always go in 4th gear in test level. He was going in 5th gear at the MCG, but, you've got to have that middle gear, and he just hasn't quite got it yet. And I think Cameron Green's in the same boat. He's got to find a way to start better when he gets out there. He's got to get over that weakness where for the first sort of 30 balls of his innings, he's a little bit slow and he looks like a deer in the headlights. And then once he gets going, he's imperious, he's dominant. So he's somehow got to try and replicate that much earlier in his innings. Sometimes you see batters come out, and you see Smith do it, and you see other batters come out, and they actually go boundary hunting early to get their innings going. They're looking for anything, and they try and hit a couple of boundaries just to get going, and then they might sort of wheel back the gears a little bit and they get into sort of cruise control. But Green's got to find his method of getting going at this level.
Yeah, fair call. But yeah, it'll be interesting. This is a perfect opportunity. I think we both agree on that. Prime opportunity for the both of them. But yeah, I think Australia will win, but you can't underestimate the Windies, even with, the lack of calibre that they have at test level and the lack of exposure at test level.
That's true. All right, a couple of other bits of news around the Australian squad. Marnus Labuschagne, there are reports that maybe he could leave the squad and head back to either Australia for the Australia A series versus Sri Lanka, or head to England and play for Glamorgan. And I think that's a very sensible idea. He needs to go away and play some cricket and get back to scoring hundreds at the level below. And that'll give him the confidence at this level, because if you look at his first class stats, he hasn't scored hundreds at first class level either. He's had a century drought there. I think he scored one in the last 18 months at first class level. So it's not just test level. So if he could go back to first class level as soon as possible and start playing, that's only going to be good for him and the Australian team. And another one, Dan Cherney had an interesting report that Pat Cummins ordered a new baggy green cap because he got his baggy green cap in 2011 in South Africa when he was 18, and now you can see the white peak coming through. And so for this series, he asked for a new cap, and he was given a new cap, and you can see him taking photos in it the day before the series starts. Well, then he's lost it. It's gone missing between the photo shoot and the first day's play of the first test, because he had his old cap on. And do you remember David Warner's cap went missing, and it turned out he just mislaid it? So at the moment, we don't know if someone has stolen Pat Cummins' new cap or it's just been mislaid somewhere.
It's probably a blessing in disguise, but as if it has been stolen, because you'd want to keep your original, wouldn't you?
Well, you get to keep the original as well. You don't get to throw it away. But the actual little thing about this is that new cap Pat Cummins got this tour was one of the last from the Albion batch that were made before they stopped making them in 2016. So obviously, they made a lot of caps, and they're all different sizes, and there's still some left from that Albion batch. And I have quite a bit of history with Albion because the factory was near where my family had a factory as well. And, we would sometimes go there and get a lot of stuff from the Albion factory. And it was, such great stuff. And growing up, Albion was, the hat manufacturer in Australia. So I can see Cummins being annoyed if he got one of the last Albions for this series and for that to go. No offense to the Kookaburra ones. I'm sure they're fantastic. But yeah, I guess we should be just scouting like Craigslist, eBay, Gumtree. Like we might see his cap just pop up on a secondary site somewhere.
Yes, and it'd be easy to decipher, wouldn't it, given the wear and tear it's had, unless you try.
Well, no, I'm talking about the new one.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, maybe true. Like the person that stole it might try and sell it to get some cash.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it'd be hard to tell the difference, wouldn't it? Because if it's brand new, you can just
exactly
like a Rolex watch.
I once got a brand new Australian one day helmet, the gold ones from the 90s. Just the manager of the Australian team, who was a family friend, just gave me this minted. I've still got it. It's fantastic. It's got the badge and everything.
When were you talking late 90s? Where
mid 90s? I got it about 94, 95.
It was a bit more canary yellow in the early 90s, wasn't it? And then you get towards the back end of the 90s when they had the darker. It was more green than anything else. Green with a little bit of gold, and I think it was.
No, this was the full canary yellow one.
Gotcha.
I have to pull it out and show you. I also got Tim May's one day jersey because.
Oh, really?
We took him home dropped him in his hotel after a game. He'd been dropped, and it was a one day game. He'd been dropped afterwards. This was at the SCG, and he had to fly down to Hobart the next day to play in a Shield game. So we're taking him back to the hotel, and we get to the hotel, and he's really down because he's been dropped, and he says, "Oh, I'll give you some of my gear then. I guess I don't need it anymore. So he gave me his jumper. He gave another mate that was with me his shirt. And little did he know he'd get recalled not long after, and they would say, it's the same kit. We're going to New Zealand. Bring the same kit. And he didn't have his jumper or one of his shirts.
Didn't have the generosity to give it back to him, Menners.
A bit too late. All right, well, let's take our first break. Then we'll be back to talk about Tim Payne, some big news for him, and also a great email from our Yorkshire correspondent. All right, you are listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners. I'm with Damien Watson. We're going through all the cricket news. So big news, Tim Payne has been appointed full-time Australia A coach, and he has left SEN Tasmania. So big blow for your employers, Damien, which is a real shame because I loved Payne on the radio. He did a great show. Yeah, with Brent Costello down in Tassie. He pulled no punches and he was fantastic. But he spoke to Waitley on SEN about his appointment at the role. And because he outlined that because Australia is about to go on a really epic generational shift, that they need to take a bit more care in fostering this next crop of players that comes through. And because Tim Payne has such a good relationship with McDonald and many of the players in the Australian team, and he knows what's required, having been captain of the team, he can play the perfect role as the head coach of the Australia A team at developing these young players and really getting them ready for Test cricket. And Damien, look, I think it's a good appointment. Payne's very clearly skilled coach and man manager and did a great job pulling the Australian team together after Sandpapergate. And also, I do think it underlines, what Australian cricket is about to face. And, I think back to when McGrath and Warne and all those great players retired and what the next few years were like. And we're about to go through that now. And, Payne has such an important role in getting these players ready.
More important than ever, and I think we'll see more and more Australia A fixturing than ever as well. There was a period there, Menners, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we saw as much. And I know COVID probably intervened as well, but there was a few years there where we didn't see as many Australia A fixtures, did we? Because there was a heavy reliance on T20. You'd have the odd I remember there was one summer when Pakistan came out. I reckon there was just the one Australia A tour match against Pakistan at Optus Stadium, and that was it for the summer. So you're seeing more and more winter fixtures, as well as the odd fixture, a couple of fixtures in the summer as well against the touring sides or touring A sides. So I think it's a good thing, particularly for the longer formats of the game. And it's good for the opposition as well to have that sort of exposure. But just on Tim Payne, you're right. Whether this appointment would have been made a few years ago, I don't think so. I suppose time heals all wounds. He is, as you said, a pretty good people manager. He probably knows, having gone through public humiliation, what it's like to be on the other end of the spectrum as well. Maybe he can pass on a few lessons to the younger players in that respect too, in terms of handling the pressure, scrutiny. And he's got a good sense of humour as well. So I think, and I think he'd be the type, again, I've only sort of worked with him in smatterings, but I think he'd be the type as well to, if he needed to give someone a kick up the arse, he would.
Yeah, absolutely. So he will also be the coach of the Adelaide Strikers, still in the Big Bash, so he hasn't left that role. Yeah. You're going to be commentating on the Australia A series, aren't you, Damien? So you'll be able to get a good look at the action to report back on the podcast. They've made some announcements regarding the captaincy. So Matt Renshaw will be the skipper of the Australia A one day, the 50 over skipper, and the 4-day skipper will be Jason Sanger, who was the under-19 skipper coming up the ranks. So I think they're good appointments and probably gives you an indication that the powers that be look at them as potential future leaders and potential maybe future international players again.
That's right. And there's a lot to prove for a lot of these Australian players coming through that have had experience before or are pushing for a selection spot as well. And one thing I heard on the grapevine too, Menners, Lance Morris might make a bit of a return at some stage during the series as well. He's had his fair share of injury travails over the journey. So it'll be interesting to see whether he plays in some form, whether it's in the one-day format or in the longer format. We know he's got reasonable one-day experience, but he's probably been frustrated by the lack of cricket he's been playing in recent times too. So because they've had to manage him due to his back issues. So I wonder if he'll get a decent go here from a bowling point of view. I know a lot of the attention will be on the batting for Australia, but as you said, those bowlers in the Australian main team are not getting any younger. You've got to replenish for the next generation.
And it seems to be they expect a lot from Morris. They've given him an Australian contract along with Joe Richardson, and I think they've basically given those players contracts so they can monitor them within the system, because we spoke about it before. Sean Abbott was called up to this West Indies tour when he's not even on the contract list. And I think, the Richardson and Morris contracts are more about, as you say, post Stark, Hazelwood, and then maybe Cummins. These are the next crop, because Boland's the same age, so he's not going to be around much longer either. So it really will be about the younger players like Richardson and Morris.
And a good opportunity for some of the batsmen, as we've spoken about. Matt Redshaw is interesting, and I flagged this earlier, had a conversation with Adam Burnett where he was talking about basically getting ready for the second half of his career. He came into the Australian lineup with a lot of airs and graces and made a pretty decent impact early on, but then struggled for form at various stages as well. And when he gets going, he gets going. He's a very elegant player off the pads, particularly striking the ball off the pads through mid-wicket. Even though he's got a very tall persona, you'd think he'd be just a slogger, and he does slog it occasionally. He's a pretty elegant player on his day. Just needs to get that continuity there. He's actually taken a couple of months off cricket, Menners. So he's had a child. It's the birth of his second child as well. It's changed his perspective a little bit as well. And he actually looked at a fair bit of vision in recent times and noticed that his technique is completely different to what he envisaged early in his career, where his feet are all over the place and he didn't even realise he developed that sort of habit. So it's interesting when you take a bit of time away from the game, what you can learn about yourself. So good for him from a leadership point of view to have that role in the 50-over format for Australia A, and also an opportunity for him to get some runs on the board, along with obviously players like Curtis Patterson, who's had a very good summer just past for New South Wales, and Nathan McSweeney as well, amongst others.
Renshaw's an interesting case. When he first played Test cricket, he made a beautiful 100 at the SCG as a real youngster. God, it would have been back in,
was it, from memory?
2017, indeed. And I thought this guy was going to make a squillion runs, and I just don't think he was managed that well in those early years. I don't. Well, I think there was, the environment within the team probably wasn't that great for a youngster coming in. Right. Sorry, not that great, just not that easy. I mean, that was, Darren Lehman, the end of Darren Lehman's tenure as coach, leading into Sandpaper Gate, and he openly said he coached for too long. I just don't know if we managed Renshaw well enough in those early years. There was those issues around his behavior within the team, because he could be a bit of a pork chop sometimes, but I don't know if we embraced it and harnessed it in the right way, because he's regressed a lot since those early days. Look, maybe I'm completely wrong and it's got nothing to do with that, but I just feel maybe we just didn't quite manage him early on, because when I saw him in those early years, I thought he's a guy who can make thousands of runs at the highest level. And I still think he can, but he's had such an up and down first class career since then. I don't know the root of that. All right. Australia A starting soon. The first match starts on Friday. I think, is that the 50-over game this Friday, Damien, or are you commentating?
Yep. Yeah, 3 50-over games. So one Friday, one Sunday, and one on Wednesday next week. And then the 2 4-day matches get underway. I think the first of them is in just over a week's time. That'll start on a Sunday. So all up in Darwin, up at Barara, and good to see cricket, first-class cricket in some capacity, being played up at the top end, because we're going to see a bit more of that in the coming years. Bangladesh are touted to come here to play against Australia next year as well. So, and speaking of which, the Sri Lankans, they obviously beat Bangladesh in a recent test series, Menners, that finished only a few days ago. They don't play, this is the main team, they don't play another test match for another 11 months. So if you think you're starved of test cricket, look at the Sri Lankans. No more test matches for 11 months from now.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. All right. Now, great email from Mel, our Yorkshire correspondent. Hello, Manners. Hope all is well and you enjoyed the first test in the Caribbean. He's been to one of the outgrounds today to watch day one of Yorkshire versus Essex, my old club, and he watched that in York. Now, I've actually been to York, beautiful little town in England, and he was hoping to debut his Cricket Unfiltered T-shirt, but it's only just arrived at the Leeds Mail Centre. So great time to plug. I've got my Cricket Unfiltered T-shirt on if you're watching it on the YouTube feed right now. And obviously the merch is all there. The links are in the episode notes if you want to get a T-shirt, and we'll be getting more T-shirts out for the summer. But thank you, Mel, for ordering one. And he continues on. There is no doubt Constance is worth sticking with, as has the talent to make one of the opening slots his own for a decade. This seems to be the plan for the Aussies. So not playing him in Sri Lanka seems more nonsensical than at the time. 100% agree. As upon looking in from afar, do you think Bancroft was given the same space to develop and fail as Constance? Was Bancroft hang out to dry following events in South Africa? Do you think Bancroft could do a job in the Ashes? I certainly do. Still loving the pod in Yorkshire, Mel. So, Damien, I guess you can have a first crack at that. What do you think? Do you think Bancroft's been hung out to dry?
It's an interesting question. It's something I've thought about as well over the last few years. Look, I think they've been pretty categoric, haven't they, the powers that be, saying that what happened in South Africa had nothing to do with his non-selection. Whether that permeated in subconsciously, I'm not sure. Maybe I would argue it perhaps has to a degree, but I think it just stifled the fact that he was out for a period of time. Probably didn't help. It stifled his momentum. He did have a very good Shield summer, and that's where I probably had my doubts as to whether, what the powers that be were saying was the case when they say it didn't affect their thinking, because he was making ton after ton, wasn't he, for Western Australia when they were in great form a couple of years ago. Didn't have the best of summers last summer. So I know he's obviously playing well at county level, but I think given the parity in terms of time coming into a test series at home, that counts for a lot. And when you're not playing well at Shield level coming into a home test series, unfortunately, your name is not going to be up in lights. And I think that was the case for him last summer, where he probably did have the chance. It was that bat off and he didn't really capitalise. So I think in more recent times, I don't think South Africa has anything to do with it. He just didn't make enough runs. The same could be said of Harris. The same could be said of Renshaw.
Yeah, I don't think he's been hung out to dry, but I can see a situation where you wouldn't want to recall him unless you really had to, because when you recall him, it could bring more speculation. And there was that interview not so long ago where he inferred that the fast bowlers knew about the sandpaper. So there's just a little bit of mud in those waters that you'll never hear anyone say it on record. But I'm sure there's a feeling that unless he really bashes the door down, why would you bring those problems back into the dressing room?
But at the same time, Menners, Smith was involved to a degree and Warner was involved to a degree, and they're brought back in because they're considered greats of the Australian team. So I think that argument falls mute if you're going to use. I'm not having a go at you, by the way, but I just think that argument falls mute a little bit because, well, then don't forget Warner. Some in the Australian cricket world who believe Warner was hung out to dry, and he didn't really retort, did he? But it's an interesting one because there's probably more of a risk there, and he was brought back in. I don't see any extra difference with bringing Bancroft in if you're going to make.
And he was being recalled. He played in the 2019 Ashes after sandpaper, so he has played Test cricket since then. Yeah. Look, for me, I've always thought he was just a little bit limited for Test cricket when I've watched him at domestic level and what I saw of him at international level. He just doesn't have the range of shots for me. He could certainly do a job. He could certainly survive. I think one of the frustrations was he didn't turn the strike over enough when he was at Test level. And then he also developed that little problem where he's getting caught off the hip a lot behind square on the onside.
Yeah, that's true. Harris had that issue as well a couple of times too. I found on a couple of occasions, particularly against Chris Tremaine and those types. So, yeah, it's interesting.
All right. So Mel, thanks for writing in. Thanks for getting a T-shirt. And thanks to Exactamundo and Damien Foxy, who's a long-time listener and is helping with all the merch. Damien, I know you've got a T-shirt on the way, so I'm looking forward to seeing you rocking that in summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. I probably should have worn it tonight. Sorry, Menners. My apologies.
No, we'll do it another time. I didn't even ask you, so don't worry about it. All right, next headline: Major League Cricket is about to hit the climax. We're in the straight. We're heading to the finals, and Victoria and New South Wales are on top of the table in Major League Cricket. I know it's so weird, but the San Francisco Unicorns that have a partnership with Cricket Victoria are on top of the table with 6 wins from 8 games. And then the Washington Freedom also on top of the table with 12 points with 6 wins from 7 games. So really, they're kind of doing better. And then you've got the Texas Super Kings in 3rd spot, and then the Seattle Orcas in 4th spot. And you've actually Mumbai Indians, New York, and the LA Knight Riders, 2 huge franchises, are basically out of it now. It's going to be very tough for them to make the 4. Not impossible. It's top 4 of the top 6 teams. Top 4 of the 6 teams go through to the finals. And at this stage, the top 4 teams have pulled away. So it looks like San Francisco, Washington, the Super Kings will definitely go through, and then the Seattle Orcas will join them. But interestingly, Damien, I was thinking about this. So in this tournament, Washington Freedom, Glenn Maxwell is their skipper. So he's effectively playing for New South Wales. And you might remember this. A little while ago, Glenn Maxwell wanted to come and play for New South Wales, and it was blocked by Cricket Victoria. So finally, after a few years, Glenn Maxwell is a blue bagger. We finally got him to New South Wales. Do you remember that when he wanted to come up here and Victoria wouldn't let him go?
Yeah, I do remember that. It's funny, isn't it? You have to poach some of our best to be successful, don't you, Manners?
So yeah, he's doing great. And I haven't watched too much of the Major League Cricket this year, but what I have seen is it hasn't been too fun for bowlers. The ground in Dallas looks fantastic, but the player to watch for Australian eyes is Mitch Owen, because he's about to make his debut for Australia in the Caribbean in T20 cricket, and he has been tearing it up in Major League Cricket. He has 4 Player of the Match awards in a row. He scored 288 runs with 250s at a strike rate of 210. So he's striking it over 200. And add to that, he's the second leading wicket taker of the competition with 14 wickets. His economy is under 9 and over. And his best bowling figures are 5 for 17, which are the best bowling figures in the comp so far. So, Damien, we are seeing Mitch Owen go on a pretty strong trajectory. And what I really like about this is, often it can be a bit of a transition for a player, Damien, going from like a star in the Big Bash to all of a sudden being a paid international pro in a big league and having to perform, because it's ruthless in these international leagues. If you don't perform, you'll find yourself out of a job pretty quickly. And, he's really adapted in this competition, and can't wait to see what he does for Australia.
I think it shows you, though, if you have a bedding down technique and confidence within yourself, I don't think it matters. And you're right. I think it's been a big jump for a lot of Big Bash players in the past, because you get cocooned sometimes when you're in a state cricket bubble, and it's hard to adapt to different conditions. I think if you have a pretty sound technique and a lot of confidence within yourself, you can break through that. And that's what Mitch seems to have in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that feeling of being the pro. You're not just one of the guys. You're an international star. You're expected to perform. So great to see. Major League Cricket, yeah, it's sort of climaxing in the next week. I think it finishes 10 July. All right, we're going to take our second and final break. Then we'll be back to talk about a couple of good yarns by Crash Craddock and especially some new rule changes by the MCC. All right, welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners. I'm with Damien Watson, and we are going through the cricket news. And Crash has a couple of good yarns, and one today, Damien, was he was looking at the schedule for this summer, and he reports that for the second year in a row, and just the second time in 31 years, Cricket Australia had decided not to play a game on Australia Day. And for listeners who maybe not remember this is because there's a lot of controversy around how Australia Day is celebrated, commemorated for different people. And when Australia does play on Australia Day, it's become quite controversial recently because, certain players, players of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent, don't want to play on Australia Day. How do you mark the occasion? Because, as I said, it means so much to different people, and these are really vexing issues. And these are vexing issues in society. If we got 10 mates in a pub, probably everyone would disagree on it. I personally think we need to change the day to a day where everybody can celebrate our great country, and a day that is more unifying. I don't think it should be a day that makes other people feel bad. But if I'm, as I said, if I'm in a pub with 10 mates, I'd probably get different opinions from a lot of them. So it's very vexing. So what Cricket Australia have smartly done, Damien, is they're just going to just drive around the issue, aren't they? They're just like, if we don't play on Australia Day, we don't have to talk about it. We don't have to deal with it, because they get asked questions. What are you going to do? Are you going to play the Australian national anthem? There was one year where they weren't going to acknowledge Australia Day. Do you remember that? Where they weren't even going to, they were just going to play it like another day. What do you think?
I think there'll probably be less controversy around it this year because it's been one and done the first time round last year, and that's when you had a lot of the media outlets talking about it. But I think now that it's done, you've ripped the Band-Aid off the first time, it's not going to be as much of a controversy the next time round. It's interesting in society, and look, we're probably only products of the people we speak to, but I think probably we had this period for maybe 5 or 6 years where it looked as if we were going to change the date, and now it's sort of retracted back a little bit, hasn't it? Just in the last year or so, I think the attitudes changed back a little bit to where people, a decent portion of the population, are satisfied with where it is. You're never going to get full unification, but yeah, that's just the vibe I get, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think there'll be much of an outcry that there's no cricket on Australia Day, because as I said, Cricket Australia has just driven around the issue by not
tennis
playing.
Is on there, and you can just watch the tennis.
Well, I think that'll be. Or will it be on? I don't know. Is it because it's the Monday after the final? So
okay. Usually it is 26th. Usually it carries over.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know the Oz Open. But
this year, sorry, it wasn't, because it was the day after the final. That's right. But it depends on the year and how the calendar works. Yeah.
But it's just a shame that we can't work this out as a nation, because, it is a beautiful day in summer where we should have a day, Australia Day, where we can celebrate the country, and we should be able to play cricket on that day. Because I remember growing up, Australia Day cricket was fantastic. Everyone's in a great vibe. But
in Adelaide.
Yeah, so let's as a country, anyway, I don't want to get too political, but no one's winning at the moment. That's all I'm saying. No one's winning. Everyone loses. All right, next story, and this sort of ties into some rule changes, but they've basically changed the rule, Damien. This is I'm not happy about this. So basically, the Michael Neser catch in the Big Bash, and we've seen it in so many T20 leagues where basically someone's outside the boundary and they jump in the air and throw the ball up, and then they jump back in the boundary and then catch the ball, and that's out. So basically, if you do some hopping on the bet when you're outside the boundary and then you throw it back in and catch it, we've all seen it in T20 cricket. The MCC and ICC have basically outlawed that now. So the ICC have outlawed that now. So if basically the fielder at all touches the ground outside the boundary, it's going to be a boundary. Like, you can't take a catch afterwards, which I think is a real shame. The batters get so many extra favors in short form cricket. This was something that looks good on the TV. It's fun when you see people do it. I don't think it takes away from the game at all. I think it's exciting. If fielders clever enough to do that, then I think they should be rewarded. And I don't like this rule change. What about you?
Yeah, I don't either. We've seen it over the years in general, where we've seen some of the great catches taken in that sort of format as well, or where they've combined often with another teammate. I see why they've done it, but for me, look, you're not going to get it that often in terms of a scenario like that. But yeah,
it still happens probably, a couple of times every competition.
Yeah. Oh, not really? Is it that to that degree?
I reckon you always think so. Basically, now when the field is outside the boundary, that's it. Like
so once they step out, just to clarify for the listeners. So
yeah, so basically, if you land outside the boundary,
you
so
parry
if you
it
land, so if you parry it up in the air but you land outside, it's 4 runs.
even if you step back in afterwards and take it inside the field of play.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Yeah.
But
so basically,
sometimes,
if you land outside the boundary at any stage while the ball is alive, even if not in your hands, then it is a boundary. This is to stop people hopping out and in. And you also can't claim a fair catch by, how you see them throw it up in the air and hop, and then they jump back in. You can't do that either. And Michael Neser spoke to Crash Craddock, and he said, it's a shame. I can see both sides. Being an exponent of it, I would like to keep it, but I could see why they've banned it. It does not look great when you take the piss and throw it up 20 meters and juggle it and dance around the field. So I can see why they have done it.
Yeah, and I see his point of view in that regard. So this comes into effect, is it October next year, Menners?
I think this year, October this year.
Okay, no worries. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I see.
Anyway, I'm against it. I'm against it. I'm going to hand up. I don't like it.
Yeah, I think we've seen some great catches in that respect over the years, so I don't like the change either, but it's not going to worry me too much.
The fun police are ruining it. All right, more rule changes. A stop clock, and I do like this. So after using it in white ball cricket, Test cricket will see stop clock, with the bowling team needing to be ready to bowl the first ball of their next over within 60 seconds of the previous over being completed. Failure to do so for the third time in an innings following 2 warnings will result in a 5-run penalty imposed against the fielding team on each occasion. The 2 warning sanctions will be reset to 0 after 80 overs. I think this is very good, Damien, and I've seen it a lot in baseball. They introduced a pitch clock, and it is significantly sped up the games. And I think, Damien, and I know, whenever you're on the clock, there is just something psychological about it that makes you go quicker.
Well, the other thing too, I'm getting sick of, in general, the layabout type of way we complete overs and over rates in general as well, Menners. So I think it's a great thing, because how often have we complained about that over the journey?
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Game of cricket, when you have just this laconic way of going through the overs. It's boring as batshit for a lot of people when that happens, and it's frustrating, and not enough has been done to combat it. So I'm definitely in favour of this.
So that's a good one. They've also introduced a new wicket zone for DRS, which is a minor change, but it basically means the actual outline of the stumps will be the outline rather than the way they used to do it with the 50% of the ball hitting the stumps. So it's just a minor change, and it's actually not going to change much. But I was reading about it that it might actually change like decisions, where it looks like it's hitting the corner of the stumps, but they give it not out. It might actually give you better results for those type of decisions. So that's just a minor change. And the other one, this is what I am interested in. And Damien, as an AFL fan, you will love this. At domestic level, I imagine this will be around the world. It'll be you'll be able to use replacement players for injury subs. So if a player suffers a serious injury on the field of play at any time after the match has started, the player may be replaced for the remainder of the match by a fully participating like-for-like player. So this is a huge change. In cricket, we've never seen this before. And I think the argument for it is, if you're watching a test match and say it's a huge test match, England v India, and one of the fast bowlers for India breaks down in the first session of the first day, and India have to play the rest of the game with a bowler short, it ruins the contest. If you're a paying customer to go to see that test match, you want to see 11 v 11. So where do you stand on this rule trial?
I don't necessarily mind them trialling it, to be honest, because I think you're right. I know these things happen and injuries happen in general, but I think you are allowed to, it's a bit like a substitution in the AFL. You're allowed to have some sort of like-for-like replacement because you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. It'd be interesting if we adopted that for the 2005 Ashes and whether that would have changed anything, Menners, because in that ruling it includes a pre-match warm-up, and that's, of course, when Glenn McGrath rolled his ankle by treading on the ball in the pre-match warm-up. It would have had a like-for-like replacement straight away under this rule. So, I wonder if history would have changed.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have affected 05 because I reckon McGrath, we didn't have to play a bowler short. I think we replaced him. But what it does mean, though, but it does mean if you like toss, if you toss and you name your team and then you get an injury, you can replace them. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the way we're going now with the advancements in medical treatment and observation, that it will be pretty hard to get around this and fake an injury. And that's obviously been the big I guess why it hasn't happened in the past.
Bit like tennis, when they deliberately delay things. Yelena Ostapenko, hello to you. Deliberately delaying things when things aren't going your way.
Well, say some guy's having a shocker in the first innings, and you're like, "Geez, can we just swap this guy out for the second?"
What about
anyway?
Arjuna Ranatunga in the 95-96 World Series final. Remember Ian Healy said that he wasn't injured.
Exactly.
He was.
So that's it. So that's the rule changes, and those are all the headlines in Cricket Unfiltered. All right, so it's can't let it go time. That little bit of news you just can't let go through to the keeper. I'll let my co-host go first.
You mentioned Major League Cricket before, Menners. A nice little heartwarming video of Ricky Ponting's son in the nets facing a lot of players. I think Greg Maxwell was throwing the ball to him in the nets, and it was nice to see Ricky. He's a spitting image of his father too. Ricky Ponting's son having a bit of a crack because obviously Punter is involved in the coaching side of things in the MLC. So I thought that was very nice, heartwarming stuff.
Yeah, terrific stuff. Mine's not so heartwarming. We spoke on the latest podcast about some disturbing allegations against a West Indies player. And Tom Decent from The Age wrote an interesting story today. They asked Darren Sammy some questions about it. He gave no answers. But then Tom Decent said when the press conference stopped, Sammy, as he was walking away, said to Decent, "You're a mean guy, man. Why are you being so mean to the guy?" So that was just really interesting that Decent would report that Sammy would say that to Tom Decent. I'm not sure around the like whether that's ethical, whether Sammy thought he was on the record. But whatever you say to a journalist, you could always be on the record, so you got to be careful.
But I think Sammy sort of knew that anyway, and he was just trying to stand up for his teammate. Maybe that was what was in his head at the time. I don't know.
Well, he said that after the press conference.
I know, but surely he knows that he's on the record even after the press conference is over. When you say it's a crowded pack.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. But I would just say to Sammy, just be careful who you defend. Like, this has to play out. These allegations need to be properly they need to properly go through the legal system. I would just be, if I'm him, I would not be circling the wagons around someone until you know the facts. It just comes across to me as a bit icky. That's all. Fair
enough. Because he might be, that's the thing, you take a risk because if he's proven to be wrong about him, well, he's going to look silly, isn't he?
Exactly. All right. Well, that is my can't let it go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. Actually, I wanted to bring it up before, Damien. What did you think of Khawaja not talking to SEN after day 2 or day 1?
Well, it's his choice at the end of the day. I think it was Bharat Sundaresan. He wanted to interview him, and Bharat's been pretty staunch in his defence of Peter Lalor as well. He's been pretty vocal about that. Look, fair play to him. If he doesn't want to talk, he doesn't want to talk. It doesn't really bother me too much. At the end of the day, if he has his beliefs, that's what he does. I know it's a diplomatic answer, but, you can't do much about it, can you?
And look, one of the reasons I didn't bring it up before is because it's kind of boring, because I agree with you. If Khawaja doesn't want to talk to SEN, then he doesn't have to. And your boss, Craig Hutchison, said the same thing on his podcast, The Sounding Board. It was written up as well. I'm a big Sounding Board listener, but yeah, he said the same thing, that he respects Khawaja. And I actually think in a couple of ways, it's kind of better for Khawaja just to do this, because if he goes on and he says something about what happened, then it's just going to make Barrett's going to be caught in the middle there. Barrett's not the reason Lawler's not working at SEN, so he would have kind of been dragged into it. So yeah, I think let bygones be bygones. But you say Barrett's, well, look, All I'm saying is all these people that are still working at SEN. So
Yeah, but I'm saying Barat has, he's come out in support of Peter Lawler on Twitter.
but he's also still working for them, so he can't
correct.
beat that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I respect Kawaja for not doing that. You go on and you make an issue out of it. It just drags it on even more. So it's kind of a nothing story for me. And the only thing I heard from Ed Cowan, which is an interesting perspective, is that so much money in cricket comes from media that you just can't make a habit of this. Like, you just can't be doing this to the media as a player, because you need the coverage. And I know less and less reporters are following cricket now. Less and less media is following cricket. So the ones that are there, you got to talk to them.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways, though, in the sense that the reporters should also ensure that they act within proper guidelines in the way they behave too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, that is Cricket Unfiltered for this week. Damien, where can the listeners catch you? Will you be on the Cricket Australia stream? Is that this week?
Yeah. From Friday morning, you can catch it on cricket.com.au and on KO Sports. It might go out to a Sri Lankan provider as well, because obviously Sri Lankan A team is in action. And yeah, looking forward to it. So if you want to tune in, that's from Friday, and second one day is on Sunday, third one day on Wednesday.
Exciting. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Cricket Unfiltered, and we will be back next week. And don't forget, check out the merch store.